Who's all wearing this thermal camo? Fuck! Is that Russian paratrooper camo? You gotta be kidding me. Technology is changing at an impressive rate, as is the world. And if we don't keep up with that, we're gonna pay the price. Now, when we talk about our videos, when we talk about our Becoming Deadly in the Mountain series, we are not talking about hunting, we are not talking about target shooting, we're talking about what the Second Amendment has really always been about, and that is resisting tyrannical forces, whatever they may be. Now, to be clear, it used to be crazy for people to practice this stuff, to know this stuff, to want to learn more about this stuff, but you know where it isn't crazy is in the areas where it's actively happening throughout the world. I hope that this information never comes to a point where it's necessary for you to practice it, but the old adage of it's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war is very true. Today on Grantham, we're going to be talking about camouflaging techniques, both visible, IR, as well as thermal. Hope you'll stay tuned as we talk about this very interesting topic. Now, before we get into it, we of course have to thank the biggest sponsor of the channel. The biggest sponsor of the channel is the Sonoran Desert Institute. If you're looking to get your start in gunsmithing, they are the people to go to. We can't thank them enough for sponsoring this channel. Big thank you to them. And of course, we can't forget Primary Arms. Really awesome optics at a really great price. They absolutely rock. A big thank you to Primary Arms. Ladies and gentlemen, my often forgotten, but most certainly not us here at Grantham, Recce. Welcome to the channel. And of course, we can't forget what, Micah?
The Patreon.
The Patreon. Get into Patreon. It is awesome. It's what the young kids would call bussin'. It is questions answered by me, terrible photos posted by Micah, and it is absolutely awesome. And it directly helps us support this as well as onwardresearch.com. Here's a Recce rig right here that we have designed and that we are making right now. It absolutely rocks. It is made to be integrated with the pack and we love it. We won't get too hard into it. Now, getting into this video topic series, the question is, what is my background? So I spent 9 years active duty as a SEER specialist teaching survival, evasion, resistance, and escape in the United States Air Force, and then I served as a TAC-P. Now, to be clear, the information that we're talking about in this particular video is not only my information. A lot of this information was cross-checked with various members of the special operations community within the United States military, both active and retired. We have to give a big shout out, of course, to Counting Coop Tactical for doing a final check for a lot of my information. So nothing's in a vacuum because there's only so much experience that I have doing certain things. So the help from that community has been certainly invaluable. And what you really have to understand is I can't make you an expert in this. The months, the years spent practicing this and spending the time in the field and learning this field craft and becoming adept with it and seeing the different situations, the different environments that you can get in and what those can do to everything is something that I can't translate across to you in one single 25-ish minute video. I'm not going to make you an expert. What I am going to do is give you a good launching point and some good general TTPs, with techniques, tactics, and procedures, and tips and tricks that I have used and that many others have used that could help you guys get down the path. I'm only the gateway to extreme autism as a quick note here. So getting into it, we're talking about three main spectrums. We're talking about the visible light spectrum, we're talking about the IR light spectrum, that's specifically night vision, and we're talking about the thermal spectrum. That's going to be your thermal optics that are sensing heat and that type of thing. But they all build upon the foundation that is the visible light spectrum. So let's get into it. Now, if you're looking for some additional reading to get yourself a little bit more up to speed before we get this started, I highly recommend the Ranger Handbook, the AF 64-4, which is the Air Force Survival Guide, as well as the United Kingdom Soldier's Pocketbook. These are all excellent resources, not just in terms of camouflage, but also in terms of general fieldcraft, all your stuff that's going to be really important. The first thing we're going to be talking about is visible. That is everything that your eyeball sees. This is what you typically think of when you think of camouflage. Everything is going to be building on what we're talking about right here, both IR and thermal. The best way I can describe to you the first principle of visible camouflage is going to be movement. Jerky, quick, flat range shit is awesome. Looks really cool. You need to move much more differently if we're actually going to be maintaining this type of camouflage discipline. And the best way I can describe it to you is think about hunting an animal. If you're going to be hunting a deer, are you going to be making sudden movements? Or are you going to be making any type of quick movements? You're not going to be. You're going to be moving cautiously. You're going to be watching where your football is going to land. You're going to be looking for any types of branches, any type of noise that you're going to be creating, because when you're stalking a deer, they're of course going to be listening for that type of stuff. They're going to be looking for you. Now, imagine that you're not hunting a deer, but you're hunting some type of a predator, let's say a wolf or something like that. How is that going to change things for you? How much more cautiously are you going to move? How much more aware of your surroundings are you going to be? Now I want you to take a human brain and put it into that predator. You are evading or hunting the most dangerous creature that is currently known in this given universe. You need to treat everything that we're going to be talking about going into these disciplines with the utmost respect, and that you shouldn't be cavalier about any of the details that we're talking about, because you have to understand, as the dumbest human being is still a apex predator in this world, as crazy as that sounds. So there are several main topics that we're going to be going over, namely shape, shadow, shine, sound, silhouette, movement, spacing, and some general tips and tricks. So what I want to go over first is going to be shape. You have to understand that the human eye is drawn to shapes. There are things that we know in this world. We know what a face looks like. We know what a human body looks like. We know what an animal's body looks like. These are objects that are readily identified by your brain. Now, one of the most recognizable things on the human body is going to be the head. Camouflaging the head is going to be one of the first things that you think about. Multiple ways to do it. Right here we have a boonie cap. I love the boonie cap because it is an easy way to break up the way that your head looks. Now in this case we have this one that has scrim on it. You can of course add vegetation. Vegetation is a great way to camouflage yourself to the local area. What you need to understand about adding vegetation is that terrain changes. So with that changing terrain, make sure that you're changing your vegetation, as well as being aware that that vegetation will wilt, it will die, and you don't want to be have a bunch of dead vegetation that's walking along. On the same note, you don't want to have an entire bush on your head, because you're going to be telegraphing yourself, and as cool as it might look static, when you start moving, you're adding too much movement to it, and again, the eye is going to be drawn to movement. So again, we have the boonie cap. Now, a lot of you are likely going to be wearing helmets. It used to be back in the day, we'd just paint a helmet and we'd call it good. Things have kind of changed. The way we think about stuff. So an easy way to camouflage this helmet is going to be some type of scrim, some type of vegetation, or some type of cover. In the case of this particular helmet right here, we have a low pro cover. This is great. It breaks up the outline of the helmet, adds multiple spots to add scrim, to add netting, to add vegetation. This is a good base for camouflaging up your helmet, but please do camouflage up your helmet, because as high speed and as cool as it is to have a high cut with all the cool stuff on it, all the battery packs, that stuff's really going to stand out in nature. There's nothing about nature that includes straight lines or symmetrical shapes, so all that stuff's going to be easily identifiable and really stick out when you're out in the woods. From shape, we're moving to shadow. You have to understand, just as exposed metal and exposed skin can get you spotted, so can a shadow. So if you have deep shadows on you that you're creating, both because of where you're hiding, where you've set up a hide site, or the way that you're moving, you have to understand that those can also give you away. Which brings us over to shine. Shine is an extremely important one. What you have to understand is that everything shines, especially your skin, especially when you sweat. There should be as little exposed skin as is possible, because skin is a great thing that just stands out, especially if you're a white dude out in the woods. You just really stand out. So you need to have yourself covered as much as possible. So you see here, we have everything covered, including gloves, and any skin that is seen should be at the very minimum painted. So we have face paint on right here. From my cargo pocket right here, I have my camo compact. So if you're looking to carry makeup around with yourself, this is a good place to have it. But no, what's really great about these is that we have multiple different color sets. This is one of my favorite ones right here, and we also have a mirror on here. Now,
which is used for like spotting enemies around a log.
Exactly, like in Saving Private Ryan, where I'm like, Jackson, machine gun nest. Now, as you can see right here, I've had this camo on all day. So I've been running in it, I've been rucking in it, and you can see that it's starting to run, it's starting to get a little bit less covering all of my skin. And the reason for that is I wanted to show you how quickly that camouflage rubs off. For all my military guys out there, you know how much it sucks having to re-camo up all the time, but it's absolutely necessary to keep that camouflage going. So what you need a mirror is you're gonna need to be pretty much every time you're stopping or going into a hide site, you should be touching up your camouflage, making sure that it is still full, and you should be checking your buddies as well, because again, like we've talked about before, you shouldn't be doing this just alone and on your own. So make sure you are keeping up to date on that. Another great product that's been used in the military for a long time are the camo sticks. So you have two sides to it. So on one side, we have that loamy light green color, and if I push it all the way through, I get that dark green color. So that's a really common camo stick that's used all the time. It's made by Rothko. You've seen them everywhere, and they work extremely well. Just understand that you need to be updating your camo as much as possible. Now, beyond just your skin, we have, of course, metal. Any type of metal is going to shine. Not just metal, but also watches. So at the very least on your watches, you should have them either turned inward, or you should also put a little bit of camouflage on them. So I'm gonna pull my watch cover off right here. So I've typically done it if I don't have a watch cover, is I'm going to take my watch right here, I'm going to take my camo stick, I'm gonna smear it all across here, thank you Sterling timepieces, and then I'm going to get that nice and rubbed in. That's going to kill a lot of that shine on there, then pull over my watch cover. That's gonna make for a much less reflective system right there. Another note on watches as well is many of those smart watches that you all wear are awesome. However, they're gonna use a little green LED to measure the pulse on your body. So that's going to be both very bright at night and extremely visible at night. So there is typically a tactical mode on the tactical models like the Tactics Charlies and Deltas. So make sure you have it in that mode so that you're not giving yourself away because you're checking your heart rate as you're moving through the woods. You don't need that shit. Another note is going to be GPSs. A lot of people are gonna be running GPSs. So again, give it a little bit of camo right there, smeared around to help kill that camouflage. As well, there are many covers that can be put on these. So you can wear these on your wrist and you can get a cover just like this, covered up to ensure that you're not getting that shine. Again, you really need to be checking all your gear. So that comes down to our weapons as well. We can see this SR-15 right here. I've done a lot to try to kill a lot of the shine that I have on this rifle, because there's a lot more than just metal that creates shine. There's of course also optics or lenses. So we can see right here, we've killed the reflection off our lens by putting a simple aim point bikini cover and taping it to it, and I can flip it off when needed. As well, on our optic, we have a kill flash, which is this nice little honeycomb pattern right there on the front. That's going to eliminate most of the reflection that you're gonna get out the front of the objective on your optic. You can see the RMR here doesn't have it. This isn't something that I'm still working on, some type of RMR product that's a good kill flash that actually stays on. More on that as I finally figure it out. On the back, you can put a cover or something like that. I tend to keep mine open, but if you have like an LPVO, it's really easy to keep some type of cap on there. That way you're protecting your optic, not just from reflection, but also from the elements as well, which is just as much of a problem. If you have your nods, I typically recommend having your nods in a pouch during the day. I'm not really worried about damaging them. What I am worried about is the amount of reflection that you get out of the objective lenses on those guys. So put those away, keep them stowed, keep them covered, and just out of the way until you absolutely need them. I understand in certain situations you might need it, but try to put them away as necessary. Sound is vitally important to think about. This is where you can really tell the people who have spent a lot of time with their gear and the people who have not spent a lot of time with their gear. I remember the first time I was issued all of my BAMs, or what was it called back there? Yes, BAMs, not bars, gear back in the day. My pack was extremely squeaky on the frame. I didn't have all my stuff in the backpack in a way that wouldn't make any noise. And as I was moving, like all the shit was just shifting around. I sounded like a cow with like a bell around me as I moved around. And my trainer wanted to murder me, and I paid for it dearly. But the point is over years of doing this, I've learned how to pack my gear. And that's something that I can't explain to you because I don't know specifically what you're going to be packing, whether you're gonna have a ton of mags or how many meals you have or what type of clothing and stuff that you're carrying with you. The point is you're gonna need to find a system that's going to ensure that you're not rattling, that you're not squeaking, that your frame's not squeaking. If you have an Alice frame that squeaks, tape it. make sure that you're doing all that you can to keep that as silent as possible. And beyond padding it, there are of course products for that. So for example, on my pack right here, I do have the Spiritus pouch, and they actually do make a padded insert to help kill a lot of the noise. So I can put that between items to keep that noise level to a minimum. So there are products around it. You can simply use socks as well. That's something that you're always gonna need to carry. It doesn't have to be something fancy, but the point is you need to kill that sound. This also is going to come into just more than your gear, and it's gonna come to you. And this is one of those things where we have to like reiterate, like, all of the best gear in the world, but if you have a shitty field craft and you're just not good at it, you're still gonna die. You need to learn how to walk in the woods. There is a distinct difference between people who live in cities when they walk in the woods and people who have lived in the woods their entire lives and the way they walk in the woods, or people who have been trained for years and years to walk in the woods. One important story is I was a pretty seasoned guy. I was out, we were pretty far out doing some survival training, and we actually had one of the local mountain men who have committed themselves to the mountains. You know, I see the mountains and I must go. He was actually stealing food from us. So I got back to the camp because I saw his tracks going in. I got there right as he was stealing food. He's this giant beard, pretty goated actually, but called out to him. I was like, hey, stop. And he took off running. First off, stealing from the government mega base in Minecraft. So he started taking off through the woods. So I sprinted after him. Now to be clear, these were really thick woods. So as I'm sprinting after him, I had to slow to a trot to duck branches, to weave around trees. And as I'm slowing, this guy is still at a dead sprint, almost completely silent, just easily hopping logs, ducking branches, just being an absolute boss, and he easily outpaced me. And the point is that this guy had spent God knows how many years just living in the mountains, being super fit, and doing this all day. So I'd only been doing it for 7 years at that point, and this guy just crushed my soul as far as getting away from me. So experience really matters. Now that being said, I did later spot him on another mountainside. He was in full furs, he was hunting a deer, spotted him through thermals, and that's a topic for a whole nother conversation later in the video. But that guy was pretty awesome. So again, experience matters when it comes to your sound. Silhouette's going to be important more when we're talking about movement. And the idea is you don't want to skyline yourself or put yourself in front of an object which is gonna make you stand out. You don't want to be on top of a ridgeline. You don't want to be somewhere where if somebody were to look up at you, they'd see you and sky. Or for example, they'd see you in your woodland camo up against rocks. Don't go in front of backdrops that are going to highlight you and make you stand out. You have to be smart in the way that you move. So silhouette is going to be super important. That does come into camouflage as well, but you can only camouflage yourself for so many situations. And this comes down to another principle, which is you can completely gill yourself up and be absolutely, you know, just a block of grass and nobody will ever be able to find you. But it's usually very specific, and it's also an ass pain to move around in. So if we're talking about moving around in the mountains like we're talking about right now, it's just not going to be extremely practical. So certainly you can go super hard in the camo, just understand that it begins to limit your movement as you add more and more camouflage to yourself and become more and more disappear-y. There are consequences when you start going super hard in the paint. You know what? Put on a ghillie suit and try hiking. It's gonna suck. Spacing. So this is gonna be when you have buddies with you. It's gonna be very dependent on your situation, where you're at, what you're doing, but in general, you don't wanna be so close to your buddy where a single grenade is gonna kill both of you. And that's what we're gonna say when it comes to that. We will do an entire video on movement and squad movement in the very near future. Now there's something that was told to me about halfway through my career that has really stuck with me. And that was, don't directly stare at someone. There's something about being this weird apex predator that we are, where we just know when we're being looked at. It might seem a little superstitious, and there are a couple different scientific things about it, but don't directly stare at that individual that you're either observing if you're about to conduct an ambush or that you're trying to evade from. There's something about the glint from the eye, just the way your eye takes in photons, however it works, don't do it. And there's actually a lot of good things about it too. You can see a lot more detail out of the periphery of your vision and that type of thing. And especially when we get into night vision, it's gonna make a lot more sense. But again, don't directly stare at someone. Night vision is getting cheaper, it is getting better, and it is becoming much more available to everyone. What used to be $3,000, $4,000 can now be had for around $2,000, probably soon will be available for $1,500. The point is that you have night vision, as does probably everybody else. You should be very aware of the camouflaging principles that go along with night vision. So the first thing that we need to talk about when we talk about camouflaging for night vision, for IR use, is that what looks good visible might not always look good under IR. So, you know, your solid colors that might do a fairly decent job of camouflaging you might not be very good under IR. They might reflect IR light, they might fluoresce, they might do something crazy. The point is, I highly recommend that if you're going to be doing anything serious, and you should be doing things serious, that you look into using NIR compliant clothing. These are clothing types and dyes that don't reflect IR light and appear very matte when viewed under night vision. This is going to be extremely important, so I would definitely recommend that you stick with that. Another note is that not all camouflage looks really good under night vision. It's going to depend on your area. That's going to be something that you need to check, but you should 100% lay your gear out and look at it from 5 meters, from 25, from 50, from 100, and see what it's looking like under those conditions. Now, the best part about night vision as far as camouflaging yourself against it is that far recognition is extremely difficult. Micah, you've done some long work with night vision before, haven't you?
Oh, decent. I mean, like, well, yeah.
How difficult is it to resolve something past 150 meters?
Oh, super.
Yeah, it can be extremely difficult.
They blend in. Like, honestly, like, definition just becomes nothing.
Just ass.
Yeah.
So what's great about night vision for camouflage is that you have a lot of grain, especially on really dark nights, and especially past those distances, unless you have a specialized night vision equipment for looking at long ranges, it can be extremely hard to identify someone, especially if they're not moving. Movement is 100% going to be the thing that gives you away when it comes to night vision. So night vision isn't magical. There's nothing about night vision where it's going to look into the night and just somehow see you. It has to have one, direct line of sight, and you have to be pretty close, or you have to be moving to get really good identification for you. We're going to pop up a few videos here looking through PBS 31 alphas, which are current SOCOM issue, and you can see at these various distances that it's pretty hard to pick somebody out. They have a little bit of cover and concealment and they're not moving. Again, that movement will give you away, but what's going to come into play here is just like what we talked about with visible. Your field craft and your dedication to these principles is what's going to be saving your ass time and time again. Get good at the basics and this will 100% save you when it comes to night vision. A big thing with camouflaging yourself under night vision is going to be light and IR discipline. We talked about the watches being able to put out a lot of light. And the big thing too is going to be small things, lighters, cigarettes. These can be seen for literally miles. Even if you build a small fire. Micah, remember that airsoft event where those guys built that fire?
It was ridiculous. It literally, like a quarter mile, a half a mile, it was like, oh, there they are.
Clocked them at 4 kilometers.
Yeah.
4 kilometers from us, we could easily see a very small fire.
Or even the tiny little red lights that they could barely see themselves.
Exactly, and so that comes down to red lights as well. A lot of people believe that they have this red light, and we've been taught in the military at least that like red light, use a red light because it can't be seen. It can't be seen as easily by the visible eye, but when it comes to IR, looking at night vision, you can see a red light for close to a kilometer, a little bit more. We get, when I've done various exercises, when I've airsofted, it's great training. You can see the reflection on the trees against a cliffside of a red lens forever. So again, you really need to keep that discipline. Now, if you do need to use a red lens because you need to check a map, you need to check a compass, what we've done, what we've kind of resorted to is we'll take a microfiber towel, we'll tape it and sew it to the inside of a poncho. So keep that poncho in your pocket, your cargo pocket, pull it over your head, then you can use that red lens without spilling out a lot of that light. You can test it. If you use even a Surefire, it can block out most of that light and IR light that you can typically see from night vision. And this especially comes true when you were talking about more advanced devices. So for example, if you're using ATAC and EUD or something like that, these are awesome. However, they put out a lot of light. Never turn this guy on without having some type of cover over you. I know a lot of veterans might be like, well, I've used it all the time and I understand, but depending on who you might be going up against, they're not going to be nearly as complacent as some of the enemies that we may have fought in the past. So again, if you do use these, be very, very careful. Here's some general tips and tricks when it comes to evasion. A big thing with night vision is that people will typically turn up the gain so high so they can see easier. The gain is essentially the brightness of the night vision. When you do that, you create more of a reflection off your eyes. We want to mitigate that as much as possible. A couple things you can do. You can use eye cups on your night vision. Highly recommended. Don't throw those away. I've seen them thrown away all the time. I know it's not so sexy to have those big suction cups up against your eyes, but it's extremely important. Beyond that, what you should do is turn your manual gain all the way down as low as possible. Turn on your night vision, slowly dial it up to the point where you can see all the detail that you need to see, and your eyes will adjust to that brightness level. Your eyes can easily adjust to different levels of brightness. It's a lit screen, you will be able to see it. So many people are turning this thing so high that they're ruining their night vision. And then finally, a point that we talked about in the past, and that's going to be don't stare at them. Don't directly stare at someone with your night vision. It's really important with night vision because that little half-curved lens on the front of your night vision are extremely reflective and extremely distinctive, especially at night. So if someone is shining a light, or if the moon is at such a way, or some type of light somewhere is in such a way that it catches that lens and you're staring directly at someone, guaranteed they're gonna see you. And that also comes down to white light. If you're going up against someone, they might not always have night vision. If they have a white light, when people are hit with night vision with a white light, a lot of people want to stare directly at that because there's that threat. You want to look at it. But again, your night vision is going to reflect it. Turn your head to the side, look through your periphery of your night vision, and engage as necessary. The scariest part of everything is going to be thermal technology. Thermal technology is both cheaper, smaller, more readily available than it's ever been, and it will continue to improve. Current thermals that we're using in this video are Chinese made. They're iRays, and they're awesome, and they're commercially available. We're not even talking about US made thermal, and they can easily detect and PID someone at over 2,400 meters. Not to mention, there are commercial drones that have thermal with about the same detection range that you can put up in the air and you can easily spot someone. Thermal is the future. It's something that we can't get away from. We can't quite do things like we've always done them because of how effective thermal is. And to be clear, a lot of people think that thermal is only viable at night. With current technology, thermal works very, very well during the day as well. As a quick note, so don't get complacent when it comes to it. Now we're going to be talking about three main things when it comes to thermal. You have your vehicle mounted thermal, so whether we have that on an aircraft, whether it's on some type of large drone, something analogous to a Predator, for example, or whether it be on a vehicle, whether it be a BMP or a Striker, you have those vehicle mounted thermals. Those are extremely effective. Those are powered by AI technology and computers, and they are very good at spotting you. If you get the Eye of Sauron on you, you're kind of fucked. Those things are extremely, extremely effective even with thermal camouflage on. Next, we have weapon mounted thermal devices. So we have things like right here, we have this iRay, which is a clip-on. It can simply go in front of weapon sights, or it can act as its own weapon sight, and you can sight in with that. Or we have this more dedicated, longer range thermal optic from iRay as well, which is incredible, over 18 power zoom on this guy. These are very effective and can detect up to 2,400 meters as well as PID at about 1,500 depending on the magnification level. Extremely effective and quite good. The last category is something that you probably haven't heard of. It's what I like to refer to as like a passive thermal capability. But you have clip-ons and fusion capabilities. So let's kind of talk about what those mean. We'll also pop up some video here as we're talking about it. This is what's called an e-COTI. It is a thermal clip-on. It integrates with your night vision device. In this case, we have PVS-31 alphas. These are current SOCOM issue. And what it will do is it will display the thermal image through your night vision, precisely what you're seeing. So if I'm looking at Micah right here as he's filming his camera, it will show me that through night vision, and it will also display the thermal image. And there are three different modes that we'll talk about in a little bit here. Now, beyond the clip-ons, we also have thermal fusion. That's where the thermal is actually built into the night vision. Those are pretty awesome. They're becoming a lot more common. So you have to understand that this technology might seem exotic at first, but it is at this point becoming a, not just common, but the norm. What's nice about this stuff is that you can just be looking through your night vision as you're navigating, and it's able to spot out thermal signatures way out to about 12 to 1,500. Now, to be clear, the resolution on these isn't that good. So what typically happens, how a team would typically run this, for example, would you be looking through your night vision with your E-Cadi on there, or the Chinese version is a Jerry C. Again, this is very common technology, and you'd see a thermal spec somewhere out there. Can't quite tell what it is. At that point, you'd either use a vehicle mounted, a aircraft mounted, or a weapon mounted thermal to get a better kind of picture of what you're actually looking like, because again, there's not really good resolution on these small fusion and clip-on thermal devices. So when we're talking about defeating thermal, what we're mostly talking about is not getting the Eye of Sauron on you in the first place. Because again, even with thermal camouflage, you get the aircraft, you get that vehicle mounted thermal on you, it's lights out. So how do we defeat these? There's a couple different ways that we'll talk about right now. So before we talk about how this camouflage works, you have to understand how the E-Cadi works, or the Jerry C. There's 3 main modes that's going to operate in. It's going to be full thermal, what it shows you every single thermal thing it shows, and it's going to be overwhelming. Almost nobody that I know runs the E-Cadi or any type of fusion in full thermal mode. Typically what they're running in is hybrid or outline mode. So that relies on a little bit of computer tech to figure out what you're looking at. How it works is it simply looks at large temperature differences and it highlights those large temperature differences. When you look through a E-Cadi, it can be extremely disorientating. So we'll pop up the video right now, because when you're looking at something, for example, a field where there's not really a whole lot of thermal difference, it begins to highlight the trees, it will begin to highlight the ground and stuff. It doesn't really know what it's looking at. It doesn't really lock on to anything and kind of really show you a human form until you see a human form. So it takes a little bit of training to get used to. Now in hybrid mode, it's simply going to show them as the full block. In outline mode, it's going to find those large temperature differences and it's going to outline them. And the farther away you are, the larger those outlines are going to get. So when we talk about thermal camouflage, we're not talking about completely getting rid of it, but what we can do is we can mitigate a lot of that signature, and we can bring our heat level down to what's close to the surrounding area. What you have to understand is that during the day, unless you're in a really cold environment, in which case this changes a little bit, rocks, the ground, the trees are gonna retain heat. So if we're able to bring ourselves to a level closer to that, it can be extremely difficult for these smaller thermal devices to completely detect you. So right here we have this Fibertex thermal camouflage. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna put it on and then we'll continue talking about it. So right now I have on the Fibertex suit right here. So there's many different types. This is the one where it's a 2-piece suit, where it's a top and a bottom. The other ones are the cloaks. They all work equally well. And what they're doing is, if you notice, there's a lot of creases, and that's actually on purpose all over the uniform. That's to create space. Now, to be clear, there are many ways to camouflage yourself from thermal. You can use things like space blankets. You can use an umbrella with a mylar blanket under it. You can use a wool blanket, as famously insurgents in Afghanistan did. The problem with that is, sure, you can use an emergency blanket. It's very reflective, and of course, you're gonna overheat. So how do you control your thermal as much as possible without overheating? And these suits are a really good example of a way to do that. So what we're gonna go ahead and do right now is we're gonna cut to a full thermal video of what these are looking like. So right here we have our 2 members. They're active duty soft. One is in cargo pants and a t-shirt, and the other is wearing a full combat apparel with a Cry AVS and Cry assault ghillie with his assault pack on. Now this man's been wearing it for a while. You can see the clothing is nice and heated up. You can see how clearly they stand out in thermal. We're gonna go ahead and we're gonna look at them at 25 right here. You can see even with the background of the heated rocks that he definitely stands out. Next, we're gonna show him at 50, and then we're gonna show him at 100. As you can see, these individuals in the open are extremely visible. Now, we're going to have our member in the full combat equipment walk out in the field. It's about 200, 300 meters out there. You're gonna see at various points that this man is going to disappear as he goes behind brush, as he goes behind small hills. And again, this is going to bring us to the point that we've been talking about a lot. And that's going to be that it has to see you. So if you're able to get that micro terrain behind you, if you're able to get those trees in front of you, if you're able to get those brush in front of you, it makes it very difficult for that thermal to detect you. Now, when we add in the Fibertex camouflage, we can see what it looks like in the open. You can see here, the member with the full combat equipment on now has on a Fibertex cloak. Now we have the cloak open on the sides right there. That way you can see what his actual thermal signature would look like. You can see with the Fibertex cloak, even at 25, is doing an extremely good job at camouflaging him. Here's him at 50, and here he is at 100. And those are with really good weapon-mounted thermal optics. Now with the E-Cadi, we can see right here, that the individual is actually indetectable. And the reason for that is that the E-Coddy is looking for those large temperature differences. And because there isn't a large enough temperature difference from what it can detect due to that thermal camouflage, it's not able to highlight that individual, and it's not able to outline that individual, because the parts that it can see, those little smidges, just look like background noise, and it's going to be very hard for an individual to passively detect you with thermal. And that's going to be in the name of the game. If we can evade that passive thermal detection, that fusion, those E-Coddys, we can do a much better job of not getting either the Eye of Sauron or getting those weapon-mounted thermal sights on us. Because again, this is fatigue, this is battery drain. It takes a lot to continually stare through your optic and scan for stuff. So you have to understand, with thermal, this is something that we can never fully camouflage against, especially when we're talking about our aircraft and our vehicle mounted ones. But we can do a really good job of mitigating our thermal signature. And the question is, how much time do you need? And this is going to depend on how much camouflage you want to put on. Do you just need a few seconds to initiate an ambush where it's hard for them to kind of detect you? This is going to be really great. Or do you need to be hidden for days? And that's where it's going to get into something a little bit more like a hide site, which we'll talk about in a different video. The point is, by mitigating it, by using good movement techniques, by utilizing that micro-terrain, those small hills, that brush, those trees, we can do a really good job of defeating thermals. This is stuff that I can't specifically explain to you though, because this is stuff that you're going to have to practice on your own. If your buddy has a thermal optic, get out there, actually train with it. Put your buddy on the side of a hill and have him look out across the field and try to sneak up to him as close as you can. This is stuff that we practice all the time in the professional military that I was in. What is the difference between a professional military force and a civilian? It's just how much you train, man. Get out there and try this stuff out. That is what's going to make the difference. Just like that man in the mountains who easily outpaced me, experience is going to be the thing that's going to win the fight here. As good as your camouflage is going to be, as cool as your ghillie suit is, if you're walking down the middle of a road with it on, you're still gonna get fucking smoked. Be deliberate in the things that you're doing. Take this stuff seriously, because it could ultimately mean the difference between living a very long and happy life or learning how quickly your life can be cut short. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. We talked about a whole lot today, and what's cool is I only have so much experience. The individuals I talked to only had so much experience. If you have more stuff that you want to pop in the comments, please do. I want to get all the knowledge in those comments, make it a place of learning. Thank you so much for watching, guys. We've got nothing else for you. Final thing for you guys, we have to do a big shout out to the Recce rig right here, designed by my company, Onward Research. Is it made for Recce? What would you say, Micah?
Sure.
Sure. You know what? It holds 8 mags and it absolutely rocks. It's made to be integrated with a pack. Try them out. They absolutely rock. OnwardResearch.com. Don't forget the Patreon, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I've got nothing else for you.